Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the show. We got a special guest for you. I was excited for this one, so let's grab a refreshment here. Get postured up. Let's get serious. We got the legend Joe Diesel Riggs here with us today, co-hosting. And we got Randy, the natural couture. Well, this episode is brought to you by Spade. Spade, 0 sugar, 0 calories, all natural, 6 flavors: cola, yuzu lime, guava, blueberry acai, kiwi strawberry, Dr. Spade. Only 6 ingredients, including water, sweetened with the most premium form of stevia on the market. There's no bitter aftertaste. Caffeine-free, dye-free, added electrolytes for a hydration benefit, just as healthy as a sparkling water and just as flavorful as a traditional soda. If you've tried Zevia, these are way better. Zevia is a little too strong. They're a little bit Zevia. And these are coming to Sprouts near you and some other stores too. So that's Spade. Check them out. Link is in the description. Dude, welcome in, Randy. Thank you so much for having the patience. We had some technical difficulties here, but thanks for getting through it, brother.
Me and technical stuff is like an episode of Planet of the Apes. So
You and Joe both.
All right.
yeah.
Okay, so we got Randy, the natural couture here, one of the greatest fighters to ever live. My dad's favorite fighter was my favorite fighter for a long time. One of the real OGs. Started MMA when he was 34 years old.
Crazy.
And I actually went up and trained at Team Quest for a bit with Matt Lindland and Chael Sonnen. And how did that all come about? 34 years old, you're done with wrestling. Who came up to you and was like, "Hey, you want to try this fight and stuff out?"
I have a buddy, Jim Townsend, was running a production company in Malibu, and we met at the Vegas Invitational in 1996 in December. I was coaching at Oregon State as the assistant wrestling coach. And he's like, "Oh man, you see that UFC stuff? You should try that." And I'm like looking at him like, "What?" He's like, "No, I know how to get the application, man. I'll send it in for you." And he went home from that trip and did just that. He sent in the application. They were like, "Oh, we got enough wrestlers. We want more exotic martial artists, but we'll put him on the alternate list." So, he called me and said he submitted my name, and that was the response that he got from the UFC. So I didn't think about it, and I just kept doing what I was doing, coaching at Oregon State and wrestling for the national team. And then the next spring, in the spring of '97, I'm getting ready to go to Puerto Rico to wrestle for the Greco team, the U.S. Greco team in the Pan Ams. And I get a call saying, "Hey, you're on our alternate list. We got a heavyweight tournament in 3 weeks. We having trouble filling the spot. Do you want to fight?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah, I want to fight." So that was my first UFC 13. I fought twice that night.
So you were in pretty good shape already going there. And what kind of money were they offering you for that event?
$20K to fight twice that night.
20 G's. So you were licking your chops saying, "Hell yeah, I just got to beat 2 guys up for 20 G's."
Yeah, well, it was a little bit different back then. I never really saw those guys till we stepped on the scale in the lobby at the Holiday Inn. It was a little bit different animal back then than it is now, for sure. But yeah, it was interesting. 2 giant guys. Tony Hollomo was 300 pounds. Stephen Graham was 290. These 2 giants, and I'm like, "What the hell did I get myself into here? Holy cow!" So. And there were more fights in the stands that night than there were in the cage. It was a little different back then.
So how did you run into Matt Lindland and you guys started training at the car dealership there? You ran into him, and when did you start training with him?
Well, I'd known Matt for years through wrestling, through the national team. He wrestled at Nebraska when I was at Oklahoma State. He was an Oregon guy from right there, and in Gresham and Clackamas. Went to Clackamas Junior College and then ended up at Nebraska. So I knew Matt well. We were both Greco guys, both on the national team. Danny and I started fighting at the same time. Matt had done some boxing smokers and some of that tough, those tough
man.
competitions. He'd done some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tough man, exactly. And he was coaching at Nebraska and living in Nebraska up into the 2000 games in Sydney. He made that team, and so did Danny. I didn't make that team, but Danny had been coming up and training with me in Oregon for both fights and for Greco. And We had started the 3rd Street Gym and realized very quickly we had no clue how to run a gym, but we were having fun just the same. And the mat room flourished. The rest of the gym was crickets, but the mat room flourished. We had tons of guys showing up for wrestling practice and for MMA practice. So we ended up closing the 3rd Street Gym. Danny and I did, and this is the same time Matt was moving back to Gresham, Oregon, and opening USA Auto. And he's like, "Man, we got this garage space in the back of the car dealership. We should turn that into a mat room." And so we moved our mats from 3rd Street Gym, a few blocks over to USA Auto, threw them down in the back, and started grappling back in this garage space. Cold as hell, but we get 20, 30 guys showing up for practice every day. And we're like, man, we need to start running this right. And that's when we reached out to Robert Paulus. We brought Robert in, who was working at a JKD gym in the area and kind of knew the business side of how to run a gym. And Matt and Danny and I started teaching and running practices, and Robert started running the office, and Team Quest was born in 2000 after the Sydney Games.
I remember I got to live with Robert Follis for a couple years there, and he would always have stories about you. And he said he never saw you once lose a sparring match in the gym. He never saw you lose a round one time in the gym. So, and even still, when I went back there, you guys weren't really big on passing the guard and advancing to half guard and getting to the mount and getting to the back. You guys were just happy staying in the guard and just beating the tar out of people.
Yeah, definitely a wrestling oriented facility and mindset there. I think it was a very informative time for us. I'd take Nate Corey or some of the guys up to Matt Hume's school, AMC in Kirkland. And man, the dichotomy between our gyms was really interesting. We had a wrestler's mindset. We're literally strapping it on and going hard every single day. And up in at AMC, they hardly ever sparred live. And I'm like, man, how the hell do you get in shape if you're not sparring live all the time? And I realized through that experience that we were probably going way too hard and beating the hell out of each other. And they maybe were going a little too light and not getting enough live rounds in. And the middle of the road was probably where we needed to be. And so we adjusted our curriculum at Team Quest after that experience, training with Mo Smith and Matt Hume, and learned a bunch from those guys. They were great. And we adjusted. We'd have, red flag days where you'd come in at Team Quest and you better strap them on tight because we're going hard today. And then we shifted gears, and other days we do situations, put ourselves in unique positions and try to work on tactics and technique a little more than just beating the dog crap out of each other.
I remember sparring Matt Lindland, and he'd have a dip in the top lip, dip in the bottom lip, and he'd spit in the corner of his own gym while we're
That was
sparring.
Matt for sure.
He would walk to the cage and take a dip. I remember when I fought in Hawaii with him. He took a dip out of his top lip, threw it in the dirt, and hopped in the cage, threw his mouthpiece in and fought. And he just, was Matt your main training partner? Would you guys bang it out the most? Or who was your main training partner at that time?
We had a great room. We really did. Me, Danny, Matt, Chael Sonnen, Matt, Ed Herman, Chris Lieben. We'd had Benji Raddick coming down, Jeff Munson coming down from Washington, Dennis Hall, or Hallman rather, and just a whole bunch of guys coming in there. Dennis Davis was in there. We had a great room. Evan Tanner. I mean, literally a who's who of guys in that. We could have sold popcorn to those training sessions. They were awesome. We had a great time knocking holes in every single panel. I got a bright idea to put sheetrock up around in there, and of course that lasted about 2 weeks. Yeah, there were butt marks and head marks in just about every panel of sheetrock we put up. There was one left over in the corner. We were gonna, every practice we're gonna see who could run somebody over into that corner and get that last one.
I remember Matt Lindland. He's the only one to ever tap me out with a body triangle. He had that weird arch to his back. Remember that, where he could just arch his back and his hips into you?
Puff his chest up.
Yeah.
So UFC 15, you TKO'd Vitor Belfort. Were you making, like, how much money were you making around that time? That was 1997.
That was my second UFC. That was literally a couple months later, in the fall. Winner of that fight was going to get a shot at the title. Mo Smith had just beat Mark Coleman to take the title from Mark. Mark was the very first heavyweight champion in the UFC. And so I was at that fight. I watched Mark, basically kick, or Maurice rather, kick Mark until he couldn't stand up anymore. Yeah, it was an interesting time for sure. But that was my second show. They paid me 25 for that super fight against Belfort, and the winner of that was gonna get a shot at the title in Japan. That's what they told us going into that fight. And the head wrestling coach, Joe Wells, kind of forced me to make a decision. Was I going to continue to be a wrestling coach? I was the assistant wrestling coach at Oregon State, or was I going to be a fighter? He didn't like the fighting. He thought it was bad for wrestling. And he kind of forced me to make a decision as to what I wanted to do. And I'm like, Coach, you're paying me more for this one fight than you pay me for the whole year.
No
I think I'm going to be a fighter, man.
Mhm.
And left my coaching position to pursue fighting full time.
So were you always pretty smart with your money? Would you invest your money, or what did you do when you made your first 60 grand? Did you treat yourself to anything nice?
No, I try to take care of it. I mean, obviously it was good for the family. We could afford a house, and I was doing all right as it was a state position. Coaching was a state program. It was a state college, so it had good benefits, 401k, all that stuff. It just didn't pay that well as an assistant wrestling coach. Um, I was always fairly good with money, but had not protect myself. I'd created an LLC and started running everything through my own corporation that first year. So I got my butt handed to me by Uncle Sam that first year and learned some hard lessons about taxes and all that other stuff.
Did you fall behind in taxes? Did you ever get in tax trouble?
No, I didn't. I never fell behind, but I had to pay a lot that first year. That's more
Absolutely.
money than I never made in my life. And I wasn't set up to kind of run an expense account and account for a bunch of that stuff. So that was a tough year. I learned a lot that year. Went out and immediately incorporated and formed an LLC and started running everything through that LLC. Obviously, that was before Team Quest even existed. We didn't really have a business. Danny and I had started fighting. Matt came on a couple years later and it was finishing his Olympic run. He made that 2000 team and won a silver medal in Sydney. So
Why does he get shit for that? I don't know exactly what happened. He gets some crap about that silver medal. What exactly was the circumstance?
yeah, he had to go to court to make the team. I mean, it was a controversial match with Keith Saraki. I was actually cornering Matt for that match, and it created a problem for me because not only was I cornering Matt we were both Sunkist Kids guys, but I was on the board of directors as an athlete's rep too, which is something I had to vote on whether this had merit to go to court or what had to happen as an athlete's rep on the board of directors for USA Wrestling. So it was a big issue. They ended up having to go to court to settle that match and determine who was going to be on that Olympic team between Matt Lynn and Saraki. And there was a question whether Matt had bitten Keith in the match.
Really?
And just a bunch of stuff that went on. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It
I
was
just
pretty
knew.
crazy.
I know what it was. That's crazy. It is crazy.
So if there's a fight that you could go back and could have gotten, I remember I always wanted you to fight Fedor Emelianenko when he was at his peak and you were at yours. Is there a fight that you could go back and get? Would that be the one?
That'd be the one. That's the only one that didn't really happen. I chased that fight for over a year, spent a lot of my own money with lawyers and, the UFC injuncting me to keep me from going anywhere else to make that fight happen. And it was an interesting time for sure. Ultimately resigned the belt to leave the UFC and find a way to make that fight happen somewhere else. Mark Cuban was helping me kind of chase that down. He had Access TV and American Airlines Arena in Dallas and a lot of connections to try and make that fight happen. And at some point, it just wasn't going to work. They had me so tied up trying to bleed me of money and make me come back to them, basically, which is ultimately where I ended up. I ended up coming back from that whole escapade and fighting Brock for the title.
Was at what point was it always show and win for you, or was it a flat rate at a certain point in the career?
A little bit of everything. I had some show and win in the middle there, but most of it was just flat rate. Eventually had enough leverage to negotiate for, a percentage of pay-per-view and some of that other stuff that not a lot of the other guys got. I was fortunate, when Dana and company bought the brand, I was the heavyweight champ, so they were kind of stuck with me. They didn't think I was very marketable because of my age, and that therein started the rub over their crappy contracts and their ancillary rights and all of that stuff, which kind of put me on the wrong foot with Dana and the rest of the company.
And then right there about 2003, I mean, their biggest stars, Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, and then you put a whooping on them both. Do you believe, like, back then they were hoping Chuck would clip you, or they would hoping Tito would take you out?
I think that, I think that was definitely the case. Before they bought the brand, Dana White represented Chuck and Tito both as their agent, as their representatives.
Oh yeah.
I had actually talked to Dana about repping me, and then he said, well, we'll have to revisit that because there's something coming down the pike. I can't tell you what it is, but it's definitely going to make me ineligible to represent you, which was them buying the brand in 2001, in January of 2001. So it was interesting.
What was the most, like, nerves you had before a fight, whether it was in the locker room, fight week, or even in the cage, where you were just the most like, fuck, I don't know what the fuck's going to happen here?
I think that first time was the craziest.
Was it?
I mean, I had no idea what I'd got myself into, fighting two giant guys I had never laid eyes on until I walked into that lobby of that hotel to weigh in. And here's a 290 and a 300-pounder looking at me like, what the hell?
What'd you weigh?
And the crowd was nuts back then too, trying to steal your clothes right off your body as you walked out the tunnel to go to the cage. And like I said, there were more fights in the stands than there were in the cage that night. It was a completely different animal. So
yeah, have you ever gotten your hair pulled or anything pulled off you walk into the ring? I've gotten the shit slapped out of me and my hair pulled and I've walked into the cage before. I had a guy spit in my face.
I got my hat taken several times.
Really?
I remember walking in to the Brandon Vera fight in Manchester, and the British crowds were very crazy. And I had a hat on, walking out the tunnel to the cage. Somebody stripped the hat right off me. It was one of my sponsor. So now after the fight, I have to put that. I need one of my cornerman's hats so I can represent my sponsor. And that hat got stolen on the way out of the cage. So,
oh Lord.
So after your second fight with Chuck Liddell, if I don't remember correctly, you retired, right? And then they called you to fight Tim Sylvia for the title.
That was electric.
Yeah, that was the third Chuck fight. Actually, I retired. I stepped away. I was going through a divorce and just not feeling much like myself. I literally didn't have to kind of pound walking into that fight. I was walked in and stepped on the scale at 203 pounds and didn't cut at all. So I was under a lot of stress and just not feeling much like myself. So I stepped away from the sport for about 13 months, 14 months. And I was poking Dana after Jeff Munson and Tim Sylvia fought in Sacramento. And I commentated that fight. And it wasn't a very exciting fight, let's be honest.
Not at all.
So that next week I was having dinner with a buddy and we text Dana. I said, man, that was like watching paint dry. I could beat either one of those guys. And he didn't text me back. He called me immediately. He's like, are you kidding? I'm like, no, I'm not kidding. So I told him, I felt like I could beat either one of those guys. And 3 weeks later, the fight with Tim was signed. So that's how that
I was
went
there
down.
when you fought Tim. That was at that point. That was the loudest I've ever heard in an arena. When you when you hit him with that inside kick and then cracked him in the old beak. That was
nationwide arena in Columbus, Ohio. It was at the Arnold, and I think at that point that was the largest crowd we'd had, with just over 22,000 in that arena. It was a crazy night.
Damn. So do you keep up with MMA and UFC much right now?
Obviously, still have Xtreme Couture mixed martial arts in Las Vegas. We have a great team. Francis Ngannou, Misha Tate, Danny Inge,
Stacked.
Sean Strickland, a ridiculous room of guys. Stadabusi. I mean, there's a great group of young men and women in there chasing their dream at Xtreme Couture in Vegas. My son's running the gym now. I signed the gym over to Ryan in 2020. obviously Eric Nicksick and Dennis Davis and all the guys in there doing a great job. Brought the team back together, got the team firing on all cylinders, and the gym does well. So if one of those guys is stepping in, then yeah, I'm tuning in to see how they do. And I've been commentating for the PFL, Professional Fighters League. That's been a blast. I really enjoy that. Enjoy that brand. I like what they're doing, taking MMA and putting a true sports format with a regular season, a playoff, and a championship every year, like every other sport we're used to.
When you decided to open Xtreme Couture, how did you find the coaches to kind of put in place?
We just attracted them. Sean Tompkins was our head coach back then. We had a bunch of those guys from Canada, John Alessio, and a whole bunch of those guys from Sean's neck of the woods up in Toronto area that migrated to Vegas and started training with us. Jay Haran, Mike Pyle, Ron Frazier started being one of our trainers and coaches. He's a great boxing guy and one of the early fundamental boxing coaches that I had and used in my corner a lot.
Was he the black guy?
Pull that mic closer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Ron.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was that kind of the hardest part about running the gym, is just kind of keeping the coaches around and keeping the vibe good? I mean, because Xtreme Couture, I mean, it's got to be in the top 3 best gyms in the world right now. And I mean, it just seems like you guys got such a good program. And Eric Nicksick, he's one of the head coaches now too, right? And
yeah,
everyone loves him, and he's such a great coach. Was that kind of the hardest part about running the gym? Was it getting numbers in the door, or just getting the right people in the right places?
Yeah, for a while we were just looked at as a fight gym. So getting the average regular members that wanted to come in and didn't really want to get punched in the face, they just wanted to train and develop tactics and technique and have the physique of a fighter. It was hard to market to those folks. Mm-hmm. With a smaller gym with a bunch of half-naked fighters running around cursing and beating the hell out of each other, it was a little hard for mom to drop Junior off and leave him in that environment. So we kind of approached it as a family atmosphere and marketed our women's classes and our kids' classes and try to get over that stigma that we were just a fight gym, and that if you came in there, you were going to get your butt whooped. And that took a while to overcome that kind of stigma. But we started putting commercials up in the movie theaters, in the matinees and during, when the commercials come on before the movie starts. And those things helped us kind of get over that hump. And then,
oh fuck! Oh
man! Not now, damn it!
I wonder if his phone died.
My God!
I'm back. Sorry about that difficulty. There we go. Yes, I thought your phone died. Ran out of minutes.
Sorry about that, guys.
No worries, brother. No worries. So if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, would you tell yourself anything? What would you tell yourself?
I mean, if I have regrets, if there's an area that I've, struggled in, it's been my personal life. I've been divorced 3 times. Mm-hmm. That's been the biggest challenge for me, is keeping everything in the air. It's, chasing the Olympic dream and then chasing being the best in my weight class in fighting. Those were very difficult endeavors on my personal life. And if missed a lot of time with family, certainly trying to chase those dreams. But at the end of the day, I don't think you can live that way. You do the best you can with the tools you have at your disposal at the time. And that's just the way it is.
What advice would you have got for guys that are retiring? I mean, guys that have trained their whole life and that's all they know is training, getting ready for an event. And then all of a sudden one day you have nothing scheduled.
Yeah, it's that transition is a big challenge. Walking into that cage, wearing those board shorts, chasing those endorsement deals and those contracts and those fights becomes a big piece of who you are. And when you decide it's time to walk away, you lose a big piece of your purpose, of your identity. And that can be brought full of adrenaline seeking, self-medicating, a lot of issues. And I see the same thing, not only with fighters and some of our friends that have retired from fighting and struggled, but our veterans struggle with the same thing. So transition is a big issue for a lot of folks. Planning ahead, making sure you build in that new purpose and that new place you're going to go that becomes part of who you are. And then you're not just sitting on your hands like, oh, all right, who am I now? What am I going to do now? That's a big challenge. We started MVP, Emerging Vets and Players, through Jay Glazer and Nate Boyer. Nate was a Green Beret and a pro football player. And so recognizing and training with Nate and helping Nate get his shot in the NFL, the similarities in transition between our veteran community and athletes when they retire, and bringing those two groups who mutually respect each other together to kind of navigate that space has been very, very, very powerful.
Yeah, I bet. You seem like a pretty durable guy, but how many surgeries have you had in your career?
I broke the left forearm in the Gonzaga fight, fractured the left orbit in the Rico Rodriguez fight in Connecticut. Those are probably the two biggest and main injuries that I sustained in the 14 years that I fought. You get the dingers, but I never blew a knee out. I had to have an elbow scoped. I had a loose body in the elbow going into the Lesnar fight. So after the Lesnar fight, I had to have that elbow scoped out. But
That ain't bad.
Yeah, that ain't bad at all for your career. And have you ever got hooked on any drugs, or do you like the Mary
No.
J or caffeine right now, or you like to do a booze?
I mean, I drink coffee in the morning,
Mhm.
and I use a CBN gummy to sleep at night. That helps me sleep. I've been doing that for 3 or 4 years now.
No
That's
booze?
been amazing.
You don't
I
drink?
have a drink. I like a glass of wine or a reasonable whiskey here and there, but it's not a big part of my life. No.
And when you're doing your coffee, is it just a normal coffee pot?
I'm doing a normal coffee pot, but I'm using a mushroom coffee. Laird Hamilton, the big wave surfer, has a company called Laird Superfoods, and it's a blended coffee, a Peruvian roasted coffee with functional mushrooms blended in. So you get the benefit of the mushrooms like lion's mane and reishi and some of those mushrooms that are really good for you, good for your mental focus, good for your immune system. I've been using that mushroom coffee, a little less acidic than your average coffee in the morning. I don't drink coffee afternoon or it messes with my sleep.
Yeah.
Hence the gummies. I have that tendency to wake up about 3 a.m. whether I like it or not. So the gummies have been helping me sleep through the night and eliminating some inflammation. CBD, CBN, these distillates of THC. It's not about getting high or any of that. That's never been a part of my life, but certainly I love that they really help me sleep.
Have you ever dabbled with the THC?
I mean, I tried it in high school a couple times.
Didn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, it was okay. It wasn't a part of who I was, and wanted to be a state champion, wanted to be the best in my weight class.
Yeah.
Smoking weed wasn't part of that
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, you see people at a young age, especially they say your brain's not developed till it's 25. You see kids that are great athletes and they start that at a young age and it just kills their motivation and they start talking themselves out of workouts and just kind of go downhill.
That's never
Yeah,
good.
I never had an issue with it, and to each his own.
Yeah.
But it was just never part of the system for me.
So now do you have a farm? Where are you at right now?
Flag.
I'm in Arizona between Flagstaff and Williams. I have a small ranch here, a little 25-acre ranch with some horses. It's 3.5 hour drive from Vegas. I had a place in Colorado, but it was just so hard to get to that it was empty all the time. I thought when I retired in 2011, things would slow down and I'd just be spending more time at the ranch, but I've been busier than I've ever been in my life. And I have this beautiful place in Colorado in the mountains that was empty 96% of the time.
Jeez.
So I sold that and 1031 those funds into this small ranch outside of Flagstaff. And we've already used this ranch in the last 3 years, way more than the Colorado place in 10 years. So very happy with this small ranch. And if I have free time, this is where we're at. We like to get here.
So an average day for Randy when he's not traveling, when you wake up on your farm, what do you do?
Chill. We got horses, ATVs. There's always lots to do on a ranch.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always something staring you in the face.
Do you what kind of shows do you watch? Do you and your girl watch any shows at night, like 90 Day Fiance?
I mean, it just depends. We just finished a series called Sandman that was pretty cool, pretty interesting, about your dreams, kind of about the state of the human condition and how people get through life. And it was fictional, but it was interesting.
So you, when with your falling out with Dana, was that just kind of because you were wanting to explore other areas and you were wanting that fight with Fedor that you had your falling out with Dana?
No, we started butting heads immediately when they bought the company over ancillary rights and their contracts. I
Oh.
had good management, and they don't really like good managers, because what's a good manager going to do? He's going to hold their feet to the fire for a better contract or a better deal.
Mm-hmm.
So when they bought the company and the brand, I was the heavyweight champ in my 40s. They didn't think I was very marketable. They would have rather had me go, get rid of me, basically. They signed Pedro to a 9-fight deal, and that was my first fight with them. And you know, we took him to task over the ancillary rights in that contract, and wanted favors nations, and there was the video game that they kind of inherited and got stuck with that wasn't very good. Uh, so we tried to leverage as much as we could the best deal for me going into these new owners, and move it forward as their heavyweight champion. And they had other ideas, and we didn't see eye to eye from the start.
Mm-hmm.
What video game thing?
Crave had an old video game. It wasn't very good. It never did very well. But when they bought the brand, they kind of assumed ownership of that old video game, and they never really. It took them years before they got with EA and really kind of broke into the video game space. That Crave game wasn't very good. It never went anywhere. So they were just kind of stuck with it. So obviously they didn't want to monetize that for any of their fighters, because they weren't making any money off of it. I understood that. But if they ever paid somebody for being in their video game, then I felt like, as the heavyweight champ, they should have a favored nations clause, and they have to take care of me as well.
That's, you got us all paid for the EA Sports video game, the EA Sports MMA. That's that one that was different than the UFC. You got us, because they didn't, at that time they weren't paying fighters for the games. And
Yeah.
you got us all paid on that, right?
Again, because I own my own ancillary rights, I could do that video game. Fedor wasn't part of the UFC, so he could do that video game with EA, and EA wanted to get into the MMA space, and I don't think they wanted to mess around with trying to do that with the UFC. So they came to us, myself and Fedor, about developing this game and being on the cover of that game, and all of that. So because I own my own ancillary rights, I was allowed to do that without having to try and get Dana White's permission to be in a movie, to write a book, to be in a video game. That's what ancillary rights are. Those are all the ancillary things that you can make money off of around fighting, around walking those 4 steps up into that cage and fighting for the UFC on their platform.
If you didn't do that, would Dana still own the rights to your stuff? If you didn't,
I would have had to get his permission, because as
Jeez.
far as they're concerned, they own my name and likeness.
Randy, when you coached the first Ultimate Fighter, how did that come about? How did they ask you to coach that?
I think Tito was their first choice, because obviously they were trying to force the Chuck and Tito fight. Chuck wanted his shot at the title. Tito was the champ, the longstanding champ for a while. And for whatever reason, they weren't able to make that fight happen. I had just lost the second fight at heavyweight. Lost the first one to Josh Barnett, the second one to Rico Rodriguez. They wanted me to fight Andre Arlovsky in the heavyweight division. And then Andre broke his hand 3 weeks before that fight. And so they said, well, we can't find a replacement on this short of notice for the Andre fight. What do you think about pushing to June and coming down and fighting Chuck for the interim championship at light heavyweight? And I said, well, that sounds great. I'll do that. I can make light heavyweight. They kind of wanted to put the heat on Tito. They said they were going to strip Tito, because Tito, for whatever reason, wouldn't fight Chuck at that time. So I agreed to interim championship fight with Chuck. Chuck and I fought, and then Dana and company asked me if I'd called Tito out. They wanted to force the issue and unify the title, because Tito was still sitting in the belt, even though he wouldn't fight Chuck. They expected Chuck to beat me, basically, and then they would force Tito to fight Chuck. And obviously it didn't go down that way. I ended up beating Chuck in that first fight.
you had the first fight against, you finally got a boxer to come over and fight you for MMA.
Oh
James,
yeah, I forgot about that.
Big James Toney
James Toney
came over,
yeah.
and I don't know if I wonder if he ever grappled at all, if he ever did a jiu-jitsu class or a wrestling class, but he had this crazy confidence, and he had a lot of people believing that with 4-ounce gloves that he could clip you with a punch. Going into that fight, did you know you were going to hit him with a low below the knee single?
Well, I think originally they were talking to Chuck about taking that fight with James Toney, and in hindsight, I think they thought better of it because they thought Chuck might actually try to strike with James Toney,
Yeah, for sure.
and that would be a mistake. So I got the nod. I think they knew there was no way I was going to try and test my boxing against a world-class boxer like James Toney. I mean, he had a great shoulder roll, left hook. I mean, he was a six division champ in boxing. He was a very, very good boxer. That was the question. How much MMA was he going to be able to learn in 4 months?
Not much.
And I think we proved how much in about a minute, 42 seconds. Not very much.
Skipping his leg out.
There, Joe Rogan was talking about you this weekend on the UFC. Michael Chiesa fought, and they were talking about the old school style, because you were one of the first ones to bring like real dirty boxing to the UFC, hanging on someone's head with a collar tie, circling them around, uppercutting them in the lips. And what do you see that's changed so much in modern day MMA compared to back then?
Obviously it's become very corporate. The uniforms, the Venom deal, the Reebok deal, those things changed the sport. I think the first season of The Ultimate Fighter broke down a lot of people's misconceptions about who we are and what we do as fighters and get in a cage and punch each other. And that elevated the sport and more than doubled the fan base in 2005 with The Ultimate Fighter. Technique and tactics seem to go in cycles. We seem to be in a striking cycle right now, where especially low calf kicks and staying out of kicking range are the trends in the sport. But I feel like the athletes go in cycles, technically and tactically. Level has risen a ton. It has become a genuine hybrid sport, where back in the day we were out to prove that our style, whatever our style was, where we came from, was the best fighting style. And I think we recognized very quickly that there is no one style that encompasses everything you need to know. And we all ran towards cross training, learning the jiu-jitsu, learning better striking, incorporating all the different facets of what mixed martial arts stands for into our fighting style. So it's been very, very fun to be part of this sport as it's exploded and become the combative sport for this generation now.
Did you ever hear any rumors, or were you in the room at all when Khamzat visited the gym and sparred Sean Strickland?
No, I wasn't there. I didn't hear much about that, honestly. We get a ton of the Dagestanis and the Russians, especially with our connection to the PFL that train at Xtreme Couture. Saddam Hussein is relocated. The Swedish champ for the PFL has relocated, does his camps with us now. We've had a lot of great fighters come into the gym from Russia and from Dagestan, and we welcome them. They're fun. They're great workout partners. We learn a ton that way.
Yeah, I'm always curious how Eric Nicksick handles it, because these guys come in, and there's a good chance if a guy's in your weight class in the big show, there's a good chance you guys meet up. So in those sparring rounds, you probably want to make sure to win those sparring rounds just in case you run into that guy in the later on. So I'd be curious to how he kind of navigates that. Does he have a speech before practice, like don't kill each other? And I'm always curious.
I mean, we kind of operate under the motto that you check your ego at the door. It's only going to get in the way. High tide raises all ships. We're all in there to push each other to the max, but at the same time, take care of each other. Not out to prove anything to anybody on that mat, in that practice space. We're there to push each other and learn from each other and make each other better. Iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another.
Nice.
That's always been our motto in the gym and in the gym setting. Don't care what all the rest of the gyms in town are doing. Just keep your nose to the grindstone. Be part of the family. Take care of each other and push each other as far as we can push each other.
And
There you go.
so they had finally announced Strickland versus DDP for the title in Australia. What do you think some keys for Strickland are to win this bout?
Sean's a very diligent, very smart fighter. He's got a very high fight IQ. I think it's always the onus is on the guy that won the first fight. What your opponent's going to change some things to come back stronger and get the outcome that he wants. And you're taking a wild ass guess as to what those things are he's going to change. And I think it always puts the onus on the guy that won the first fight to figure out what he's going to change and how he's going to approach it differently to get a different outcome this time. I'm not really part of Sean's camp. Obviously, I'm part of the gym and created an environment for these guys to flourish and chase their dreams. But I'm not technically in the loop with Sean. There's a lot of great coaches in there, a lot of great training partners. I'm sure they're probably just now formulating exactly how they want to approach this fight coming up in January. I think it's January or February, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in January. So someone like
Yeah.
Khamzat Chimaev, though, who just sprints at you, goes 0 to 100, shoots on your legs, comes up to a body lock, and he's just relentless on it. How would you coach an athlete? Like even Robert Whitaker says, it's like almost going to be, I don't want to say impossible to stop because someone's going to be able to stop it. How would you even plan for that? Someone like that, Khamzat, who's so fucking powerful, so relentless on that takedown, and when he does get you down, he's a really good back taker.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you have to prepare for. You have to put yourself in those situations, have guys relentlessly pursuing you to put you on the ground, try and shackle your ankles, Dagestani leg irons, and tie you up and smother you and force you to turn to quarter position and give up. I mean, that we've seen that style time and time again. So you're gonna have to put yourself in a bunch of those situations in a good 10 or 12-week camp, and be ready to have counters and answers and out wrestle in those circumstances, not concede. So many guys concede and give up the back position, give those positions up. It's no different than preparing to fight a guy like Tito. 96% of Tito's fights are won by securing that takedown and floating over a guy and landing those elbows and smothering him. And it's not rocket science. It's the same thing, same style.
Yeah, and you see guys come over from freestyle, or you were primarily like a Greco guy wrestling coming up, but do you think folk style is the best style for MMA where you can get a leg in, put hooks in, start power halfing people?
Greco and folk style are the two styles that translate directly to MMA. Greco because of the upright posture, the clinch fighting, the solid barrier, and now I can touch legs, I can trip, and things that are forbidden in Greco become allowed in the cage. And then the control positions in collegiate wrestling, putting those legs in, leg riding, riding over somebody, floating over somebody, all those things translate directly, those control positions from collegiate wrestling, I think translate directly to MMA scenarios and situations.
Yeah, you were one of the first ones to come out and just have that person just carry your weight the whole time and just be relentless and
Hanging on their neck,
getting on top of them, pinching your hips to their hips, and just really breaking them, making them fatigued and beating their asses. If you had $10,000 to bet right now on Bo Nickal versus Khamzat Chimaev, who you picking?
Ah, man. I think Khamzat has a little more experience in the MMA realm right now. Bo is impressive, an amazing competitor on the wrestling mat, but I think he's still making a transition. And I was happy to see him get a little more ring time in this last fight and go the distance and spend some more time in there, not just get the submission early. So I think at some point he's going to be a champ. There's no doubt in my mind. I think it might be a little early to match him up with Khamzat, because I think Khamzat's been in a while longer, has made the transition fully from that wrestler's mindset to being a fighter, a well-rounded fighter.
Who in the gym was some of your hardest wars? I'm sure you and Dan Hendo went at it, because Robert would always tell me Dan Hendo had one pace, and that's cracking you with right hands.
Well, Dan was certainly the first one to knock me on my ass. We were in a ring at a JKD gym, one of Matt Thornton's JKD gyms in downtown Portland, and Danny pasted me with an H-bomb and knocked me right on my butt.
Jeet Kune Do, is that what it is?
I didn't realize what happened till my butt hit the canvas, and I was like, "Oh, okay."
So now you still wrestle with Francis Ngannou a bit. What is it like wrestling that guy?
Francis is very explosive, a lot of fast switch muscle there. He's worked diligently on his wrestling. That was why he came to Xtreme Couture, to shore up that part of his game. I've only really been on the mat with him once in one round, and yeah, he blasted me with a double. I don't think I've been doubled like that since I
Took you
was in
down?
college.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
No shit.
and the sun disappeared. Are you kidding?
Who's a bigger? Is Brock bigger than him, or are they pretty much comparable?
Brock
Same
is
size?
much bigger. Brock walks around at 290. He's a big guy.
And what does Francis walk at?
Francis 255.
Oh, no kidding. I thought he was bigger than that.
Yeah, very, very athletic, both of them. I would say the power would go to Francis as far as punching power and overall power compared to Brock. But Brock is a great wrestler, very good, very athletic. You know, has that mat sense that's hard to teach the average mixed martial artist walking around.
You think Francis has any shot of beating John Jones if they fought?
I think he does, absolutely. I think it would absolutely force John to use his wrestling more, because you don't want to stand around in front of a guy like Francis.
Shit, no.
If you could go back and change something when you fought Brock Lesnar, what would have been?
I mean, honestly, I was on my way to winning that fight.
Mm-hmm.
I think if he hadn't grabbed the cage in the first round, I had him up in a high single, and he locked onto the cage, and the referee let him get away with it.
Fuck.
And I think if he'd hit the deck, it might have been a different night.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. You know, and I think it was apparent that Brock hadn't really made friends with getting punched in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And even I hit him with a left hook and cut his right eye. And you could see when he saw his own blood on his hand, it kind of freaked him out. And we saw that with Velasquez and Overeem. You know, he didn't make friends with the fact that he was going to have to get punched in the grill to get where he wanted to be.
Did Brock land that shot on the back of your head when you guys fought? Did he throw that right hand, hit you kind of behind the ear?
Yeah, he hit me right behind the ear. I mean, that's the thing with Brock. He didn't realize how long he was. He had a 96-inch reach.
What?
Holy shit.
He's huge. He looked so thick. You didn't realize how long he was. And that hand just was like a canned ham coming at you.
That's what you called that.
And it just kept coming.
Mm-hmm.
Well, shit, man.
Dude. Well, Randy, fuck, it was an honor talking to you.
Randy, this is one of my, like, I always talk about this, and it meant the most to me. When I was 17 or 18 in California, the first time I met you, I've always, my whole life, I would just always put you on a pedestal. And it was Jeff Blotnick. I was eating lunch with Jeff Blotnick. It was at the WEC in Lemoore. Like, I was,
okay.
I forget what year. And it was the first time I met you. You trained with me for hours. It was one of the best times of my life. And then I didn't have. I was young. I didn't have any money. Him and his wife Kim at the time. You guys come back in a taxi, and I think I have $20 in my whole pocket, and then I go pay for Randy's fare, and I was so happy to do that. And he was such a nice guy, and it was fun. It still sticks with me to this day how warm and kind you were to me. So I mean, do you remember that? That's the whole point.
I do remember that.
Good. Thank fucking God. God. If you didn't, I would have ended everything.
Obviously, you know, Jeff was a Greco guy, and somebody we all knew from the Greco, from the 84 games and winning a gold medal in the 84 Greco wrestling championships. And then was associated early on as a legitimate Olympic athlete to commentate for and give the brand some integrity back in the day with SCG. And obviously, Jeff was a great guy, overcame Hodgkin's lymphoma, ultimately to win that medal, and was one of those stories in the Olympics. So he was just a great guy. And I definitely remember that.
Thank God. Thank you, Randy, for remembering that. That means a lot to me. That's good.
And Randy, you were one of the coaches on Fightmaster with a young Timbo and a young Joe Riggs. What were both of those guys like back in? I guess the seasoned Joe Riggs.
I think I was 31 or something.
What were those guys like back in the day?
Well, Joe and Mike ended up in the final. So, you know, and Joe ended up winning that series. That was a fun series. Shot in New Orleans. That solidified my being out of the UFC and not, there was no coming back. When I signed the Spike deal to do Fightmaster and some other scripted and unscripted television, that's when Dana really went off the reservation. And started bashing on me and really kind of went public with his distaste for me, basically. So the first thing I did when we did our first press conference for Fightmaster was thank Dana for all the publicity he was giving the new TV show. And we never heard another thing from him after that.
Why do you think it wasn't successful, the Fightmaster?
I mean, it's hard to say. I thought it got good ratings and did well.
Well, they didn't do another season anyway. Is that what?
Yeah, they didn't do
did
another
ratings?
season. I think they were very reality rich with the bar rescue and some of the other stuff they were doing. And then we did Gym Rescue. We did 3 episodes of Gym Rescue, me and Frank Shamrock, and that got great ratings as well. And they chose not to do the whole season. And what we were told was that they were just very reality TV heavy, and they wanted to. They were getting ready to launch King Tut, which was a period piece that costs a lot of money. They were kind of meddling or fiddling around with their programming. It felt like they had too much reality TV at the time. That was what I was told.
Yeah, and then one more question for you, Randy. Thank you so much for your time. You obviously are working with the PFL now. What do you see as the future for the PFL?
Obviously, I think you're going to see these regional promotions continue to flourish. We're just coming out of our PFL Europe second season. PFL Middle East, North Africa just had their first season. I think next year you're going to see Latin America and Australia come on board as another feeder program for the global season, which is where I'm working, that regular global season, which we just had our final in Saudi Arabia with some amazing fights. Dakota Ditcheva coming out of PFL Europe's first season to win the PFL Global season a couple weeks ago in very impressive fashion, beating Talia Santos. A couple of Russians in there, Umlatov and some others looking very, very good. Umlatov suffering his first loss against Shamil Musayev, another Russian who was undefeated. So yeah, very, very tough. And only a matter of time before they found their way from the combative sports world in both boxing and wrestling into mixed martial arts. So, yeah, I think obviously we absorbed Bellator last year. That's 215 fighters. We've kept that brand intact, but I think at some point you'll see the PFL absorb that brand, and it'll be PFL championship fighting at that pay-per-view level with a lot of those Bellator fighters. You're going to see Hughes and Nurmagomedov fight here in a Bellator championship in Dubai coming up in January, which is going to be a great fight. And a big pay-per-view. Obviously, Francis and Renan Fedor were kind of the first big pay-per-view model for the PFL. I'm not sure how those numbers did, but definitely helped secure Saudi Arabia. Saudi is trying to take over boxing, taking over golf, making a run at MMA with UFC and PFL both in Saudi Arabia right now. So the brand is doing very, very well, growing very, very fast. So there's some growing pains involved with the Professional Fighters League brand, but I think we're managing that and staying on top of it. So I love the meritocracy of it. You know, it's not about talking smack or publicity stunts. It's about going in that cage, winning fights, scoring those criteria points, and securing your position in the playoffs, and then having a crack at that championship each and every year. So I like that format. The fighters fighting 4 times in 8 months. Most of them like that. They're not waiting for the phone to ring. Like, when's my next fight? I know exactly when my next fight's going to be. And that $1 million purse walking out of that championship arena is no small thing either. So
yeah,
I like what they're doing.
I'm so curious what's going to happen to the pay-per-view model now that it's just so easy to pull up an illegal stream. I know they just had Jake Paul, Mike Tyson, and I think like something like 100 million people watched that live on Netflix.
Hasn't paid for a pay-per-view in many years.
No, I mean I usually do. Oh. But 100 million people watched Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. So
yeah, well, and it was interesting that it was Netflix, and Netflix dipping their toe in the MMA water to see how that went with Netflix. So they've done a couple of sporting events, and they're not traditionally a sporting platform, but I think they're looking at the idea, they're toying with the idea of getting into athletics. So I think that's good. That's a good indication. I thought that fight was everything we hoped it wouldn't be. It was a work for sure, but
Wait, what was the work?
The Tyson fight.
Oh yeah,
Tyson Jake
Paul. That's just fucking terrible.
Well, Randy, dude, thanks so much for spending the time with us. You're an absolute legend, and thanks for talking to us.
Thank you, Randy.
Appreciate you guys having me on. Joe, it's great to see you, buddy.
You too, buddy.
Thank you, guys. I again really appreciate you having me on.
Yep. Hopefully see you soon.
Later, Randy.
Y'all take care. Be well.
Oh, thank God he remembered that. Fuck. That would have been brutal to me if he didn't. I think I've spoke to you. I've told all you guys about that probably several times.
So that they found the healthcare killer.
He did. So he drew. He wrote on the bullets like his reasonings, like put like little.
A little saying. It was now arrested and they charged the murder of the death. Brian Thompson had 3 pages of writings on him at the time he was taken into custody. Officials said, I mean, damn, that's pretty crazy.
He went into a store and flashed a little smile at the woman, and she that's what she recognized him. They called the authorities. Is that what happened?
I guess so. 26 years old.
Did you see the video? He looks like he's had some sort of training. You look at his feet, where he's standing, he's holding a gun, and then he when he was trying to clear the jammed gun, it looked like that's what he's doing what he was supposed to do.
Yeah, that's
he wasn't
wild.
some pencil dick that never fired a gun before.
Mm-hmm.
But there was 2 other people with him. Is that what it was?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure here.
Fucking probably completely wrong about that.
But pretty cool having Randy Couture on. I mean, for newer fans, like he started MMA at 34 years old. Like
Seriously?
he was just a pure wrestler. Started fighting at 34 years old, and
well, he boxed in the army. He boxed in the army. I mean, it wasn't extensive, but a couple years in the army. I mean, he had decent hands, but he felt more comfortable throwing those uppercuts and short hooks from the clinch,
or just getting close to you and wearing you the fuck out.
But yeah, that when I was there, when I was in Tim Sylvia's corner when he fought him, and he just inside leg kicked him, that hit him the overhand. Tim just fucking crumpled. God.
That is crazy though with that Brock Lesnar fight. Like if you had to finish that single.
Do you remember that fight?
Force Brock Lesnar to get into a scramble. Brock Lesnar's heart rate skyrockets. One scramble can change a fight.
Fuck yeah.
So that's definitely.
Especially a big guy like that, and you're trying to get back to your feet and stop getting whacked on. Brock's fucking huge. But that shot did. I remember it landed right in the back of the fucking like right behind the ear, and kind of that was it.
So you went swimming this morning?
Yeah, fucking dude. That's gonna hurt the rest of the day though.
Just doggy paddling laps?
Oh, I've when in Montana I learned how to swim properly. So because I can't run anymore because my ankle, so I learned how to actually swim, and then we head down, breathing the right way, and I'm completely fucking out of shape. And this old guy next to me was trying to entice me into a race, but fuck, man, when you're swimming and you're breathing hard, you just inhale the water and just downhill from there, and then you get out. It's just. You embarrass yourself wheezing. You think everyone's laughing at you. I want to go in there and attack the old guy. But yeah, I just got to keep at it.
Yes. So thanks for watching the show, guys. Hit that like and subscribe button. We're creeping up real close to 200,000 subs, and it's going good. We're going to keep coming at you with more episodes, and I'm going to do a house tour. I think in 2 weeks, we're going to do a house tour of the new house and show you the new home gym because it's pretty cool. So hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everyone. Love you all. See you next week. Bye-bye.